Hey drivers, you need an engine to keep your old VW on the road, but new parts are expensive. Let's build an engine using an old case we have laying around and do all the work that we can to give a bunch of swap meet parts a second chance. We'll start in the swaps. So I was able to sneak away for the Bug Fest over here in St. Pete, just south of Tampa. I've just picked up a set of single ports. My buddy Steve hooked me up. He's got a really cool swap space. Hey Steve, and check out this bus. If we lower our expectations a little bit, we get a whole lot in return because we get to support each other in the hobby. We get to get an engine back in our car and stay on the road. And we get to meet some really cool people. Also got an oil plate that's kind of interesting. I'll show that to you here. Some wiper blades, didn't really need those. Got some single port cooling tins, original ones of course, so that's a great thing. So we're stocking up on our budget engine build here, the Hard Times engine build. Having a good time at the swap meet. I'm running back for a little bit more money because I ran out. Had a great time at Bug Fest over at the Quaker Steak and Lube. Got some good things in the swap meet. So let's see where we stand and then maybe get started on the selection process. What I like about these, other than the fact that I don't see any cracks, I don't see any stripped threads on it, is the fact that it looks like it just came off of a running engine. This hasn't been sitting out anywhere. Just needs to be cleaned up and checked out. We may find something, but initial inspection is that these are in pretty good shape, so I'm really happy to see that. I don't see any thread inserts for the spark plugs, so lots of good signs on these. I picked up some single port cylinder tins too. I thought I was getting 2 sets, but I made a little bit of a boo-boo. Can you see what it is? This is what I'm looking for. You see the single ports for the later models, this was slanted a little bit. Let me really get the head sitting up here. You can see that that has an angle to it. And we need the tins that sit down in there. Let's take a look at that. So this tin slides into place right there, and it's going to do a good job of sealing all the way down to the head. One of my tins looks like this. You can see that this tin is made for a flat head. I think that's going to probably be the 40 horse engines or just something earlier is what I'm confident about there. Also, I think the 40 horse was a little bit skinnier. So I've got kind of an oddball here. I should have looked a little bit closer at these cylinder tins, but we're doing good on tins for this build. Picked up a degree pulley. Not many degrees left on it, but this will suit us just fine. It looks like the important parts are in good shape. I don't see any heavy galling in here. So we're going to clean this guy up a little bit and use that on our crusty build. Based on recent experience, I've felt it best to have an original shift coupler on hand. So I want good spares, and I've lost confidence in the repops of these. This was kind of an oddity. Some friends clued me into what this is. That it is an oil filter housing. The thing that I'm not so sure about this design is it puts the oil filter on the suction side of the pump. I think I'd feel more comfortable having any kind of a restriction like an oil filter on the high pressure side, like the conventional full flow oil filter setup, which we'll be doing on this engine. These are the cases that we have to choose from. Let's start off with this one. Let's get it on the bench and we'll take a look at the situation. First up is the case that actually came with Dweezil. Now this is an AE case. This was later than the 68 model year that Dweezil is, but as far as I'm concerned, this is the engine that came on Dweezil. It's actually not in terrible shape in a lot of ways. And it's kind of desirable because it is dual relief. It's got both of these dealy-doos here, the relief valve and the volume control. The marks against this case are, number one, some stripped out studs. Looks like all the ones on this side are okay. It's even a deep stud case, which is very desirable. Over here I have 2 of the head studs that are stripped out. That one may be going. These are the 10mm studs, and they're kind of known for that. So this will require case savers. Not a huge deal, but a slight mark against this case. The killer is not that it needs to be a line board, because really I don't think it does. This feels nice and smooth to me. You'd expect in a used case that you're gonna catch fingernail on there and then it needs to be a line board, but this one does not. It has been a line board previously in a previous rebuild, but it's not ready for it again. I'm thrilled about that. The problem with this case that takes it out of contention for this project is here. See how much that wobbles? So this poor thing was run with dirty oil in it, and it wore out the lifter bores. So that's a no-go. This is how the oil gets out to the heads, and we need that oil to get out there to cool those heads down and carry the heat back so it can make its way into the oil cooler. Not enough pressure is going to get out there if it's all escaping through these huge gaps here. So that's a real bummer. Now, as cases go up in price, it becomes more and more worthwhile to have these bored out and sleeved with some silicone bronze sleeves. And I am not opposed to that, but don't have the budget for that in this build. So this one's gonna wait for a future opportunity to possibly be brought back to life again. It's just not close enough to being able to get away with it for this build. Sorry, Dweezil's engine case. We're going to have to look elsewhere for this build. Next up is another AE case. This one has actually had a rebuild on it, and they stamped it here. Over here, they stamped on the case, if you can make that out. It says 020 and 040. That's 020 thousandths of an inch on the line bore and 40 thousandths of an inch thrust cut. I have placed a #1 bearing into this engine case, and it was nice and snug, so the thrust is still good on this case. That's good, but it does need to be a line board. We see what we didn't see on Dweezil's case, and that's a little bit of a ridge here. Too much for comfort, so this one needs to be a line board, and I'm going to try and find a case that doesn't need that for this build. But this is definitely a contender for a later build where we go ahead and pay for it to be a line board, or maybe by then I will have figured out my porta tool and can do my own line bore, which is really my favorite answer. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of time to maybe get that together. Okay, look at this piece of work. This has a lot of corrosion. It's really gritty on the surface. We see a lot of rust in here, surfaced rust, I believe, on the case savers. This thing has been exposed to a humid environment, so that probably just means it's lived in Florida. At one point, I actually bought an engine case for $10. If I had to guess, this is the one. I looked through the cases that I have, and I think this is it. This is a steel plug, which is not my favorite material. I like aluminum for that. It expands a little bit closer to the way magnesium expands. But it's just that one galley there. They didn't do the other one. These are the lifter oil galleys here. And we find another steel plug over here. This would be a main galley that goes down the case. Curious on why just those have been tapped. Maybe they had interesting ideas about what was absolutely necessary to clean, leaving everything else in place. I don't know. I think at this point, a lot of folks would have moved on from this case just because of all the corrosion we see, even inside. Look at this oil pickup here. This is a mess. This is a rusty mess, and I would not want that inside my engine. Another problem is the corrosion is also down in the lifter bores. I can't get that thing down in there. So I don't think they've swelled up. I just think a little bit of corrosion is enough so that the lifter actually doesn't go down into the lifter bore. I did take a wire brush that size just a little bit larger than the bore and ran it through this one a little bit. I think that knocked the corrosion off, and now we have a nice tight lifter bore. Like it can move fine, but it doesn't have a lot of wobble. So I think these lifter bores can be cleaned up enough to have a chance. This is starting to feel like the right choice for the crusty rebuild. See, what we're trying to do here is build an engine out of free or nearly free parts. Trying to avoid new stuff, keep the budget super low, and just be realistic about our expectations. So can we clean this case up enough to actually run? Here's where things start to look better. These bearings don't have the ridge. They're pretty smooth. There's a little bit of a bump here, so if we were really being cautious about this and felt like this case was worth the money, we'd a line bore. But I don't think it's worth the money. I think it is worth a try. So I think this case just barely meets the criteria of we can clean it up and it doesn't need a bunch of machine work. Now what it does need is to be decked. The cylinders sit here, of course, on these spigots and kind of pound into the case. And so I really want this surface to be nice and flat. I have a mill drill that is not the right tool for this, but we're going to see if we can mill that flat. It's had its share of drama, but it's a great drill press, and I'm able to do some light machining, not expecting the utmost in accuracy, but it's just enough to try stuff out and learn a little bit. I got it really cheap because it's compromised. There's a not so great repair on a crack, and this is a machine that's not all that sturdy to begin with. It's going to be pretty sketchy. I may mess it up and then we won't be able to use this case, but we're going to give it the old college try. Also going to do some oiling mods. One of them is particularly sketchy because we'll be drilling out the oil galley for all of these lifters here, and we'll be drilling down this direction to intersect. This is part of the Hoover HVX oiling mods. And the thing we have to be careful of is not poking through back here. I've done some measurements and I think I barely have enough room to do it. So we're going to try that out. For a $10 engine case, why not, right? So we've chosen a case that cost us next to nothing. Check out this video to see how the work goes as we try to get things into shape. Spoiler alert, we run into trouble and it's a game changer. See you in the next video.